Hi. Did you like my clickbait title? I'm trying something new here. So I've been wanting to talk to you guys about something I've been thinking about a lot since maybe like 2021. And it's kind of like a shift in my business that I decided on after OkashiCon last year. No energy drink today, but I've got a nice coffee I made myself and put in my fancy fellow mug. So let's sit and chat for a little bit, why don't we? Okay, so at OkashiCon last year, I found myself having a lot of fun. And I was kind of surprised, honestly, because I feel like I hadn't had fun at a convention in a long time. I was just like, oh, this is enjoyable. I started trying to think about why that was, like what was different about OkashiCon. And the big thing I realized is that I didn't go with the stress of like a sales goal, basically. I didn't have one in mind. Obviously, when you do events in Artist Alley, you're wanting to make a profit. But for this one, I mainly went to support a convention that I believed in and a community that I'm a part of, as well as to like see my friends and make new friends and have fun and all that stuff. And so the more I thought about this, the more I realized that I just don't want to do Artist Alley the same way that I was before the pandemic. So I thought, you know, let's grab a drinky, we can go through it together. You know, just in case some of you guys are maybe at the same stage, having some of the same doubts, or at the start of your Artist Alley journey and maybe like need another perspective because you're not sure about it. So this is just where I'm at with ugly plants. I broke it down into like 5 reasons, but each reason has like a lot of sub reasons, but people like lists on the internet, so we're doing a list. The first and simplest reason that I am kind of moving away from Artist Alley is that my art has shifted. Primarily, that means that I don't do as much fan art as I used to. My stance and feelings about fan art haven't really changed. Obviously, I used to do a lot more. I just haven't been as inspired to make fan art the way I used to be. So I haven't, you know. Ultimately, an anime convention, Artist Alley is for fan art, right? It happened kind of like at the same time as my shift away from fan art. I also kind of have less of a variety of items. I think during the pandemic, I started focusing more on like big projects. And so I have less little things that like kind of flesh out the shop, which is like a problem that I'm working on, but it does make it kind of harder to do Artist Alley because I feel like when you're just trying to sell a couple of bigger things versus like having something for a lot more people, which is what I used to do when I hand sewed things, I would just make a few things. Yeah, it doesn't work as well in Artist Alley. In general, that's something I'm working on, but that's just another way that my art has shifted away from like sort of the Artist Alley model. The second reason is a little broader, but it kind of goes along with the first reason, which is just that the scene has shifted. I think the convention scene is a lot bigger now. To me, it seems like anime kind of blew up over the pandemic. You guys let me know what you think. And as a result, anime conventions don't feel as niche anymore. Going hand in hand with the fact that I don't feel like I'm serving the anime community anymore with my art. As the anime community grows, I feel like also, I just kind of feels like we're going like this, like 2 different directions. Does that make sense? I don't think any of this is a bad thing. I think it's really cool that anime has gotten bigger. It's like so accessible now. My camera battery died. So if the frame shifted a little bit, that's why. Let's just pick up where we left off. Right, so the convention scene is a lot bigger now. Anime blew up. I shifted away from anime. These 2 things go like this. Right. As I was saying, I don't think this is a bad thing. But personally for ugly plants, I sort of want to find a new niche. Or like foster the niche I exist in, if that makes sense. Create new niches. You know, more fashion focused, more pastel. I like when ugly plants serves a niche community. It's more fulfilling to me that way. And I just don't necessarily think anime is that niche anymore. Like I think that ugly plants worked in that context. I think that like, I think that they're like sort of not, the Venn diagram's not Venning. So I'm just sort of reconsidering in-person events that way. Okay, so the third reason that I am sort of not feeling Artist Alley anymore is that there is more competition. This, again, is a good thing. I'm not like mad about that. On the contrary, I'm so happy that so many of you are trying this like lifestyle. I think it's a lifestyle, honestly. And I'm of course a huge supporter of people selling their art and making things they're passionate about. But at the end of the day, it does mean that it's like harder to get into events now. It just is more competitive, which has impacted me specifically in 2 ways. One is that I find that I do not care enough to keep up with apps, deadlines, virtual queues, like all that stuff. I can't. I never really enjoyed this aspect of artist alleys, and I always kind of sucked at it. I would just like miss things all the time. I would try to set calendars. I would try to like remind myself to check when things were going live. It just is so much work. Now it's almost impossible for me to motivate myself to do it, to keep up with it. You know what I mean? Which I think is kind of a sign. It's the same reason that I don't even bother like thinking about trying for K-pop concerts anymore. I went to a few in like the 2013, 2014 era of concerts, and like now I cannot. But then the other way that it's impacted me is that it kind of feels like I'm passing the torch. I'm really happy to see other people having a great time at their first conventions, their first artist alleys. Both people selling and also people attending for the first time since the pandemic. Like some people never went before and now they feel bold. Some people, like I said, got into anime in the pandemic. Some people were too young to really go to shows. So we've got a whole new group of people, and I'm excited for that. I'm excited for those people because anime conventions obviously have always been a big part of my life. On the other side of that, Ugly Plants shifted away from conventions during the pandemic because obviously I wasn't going to them. So like the business model kind of shifted. I filled in the blanks in other ways. When I couldn't go to conventions, that was a huge chunk of like my annual revenue that was lost. So I just like focused on other ways. Part of me feels like I don't even need Artist Alley anymore, and like I'm kind of okay with that. And I'm also okay with not adding to the competitive like field of getting into artist alleys when my heart's like not really into it. Like I'm very happy to let other people do that when they care very, very badly. And I'm like over here just kind of like, meh. Plus now I live on the West Coast. I feel like there's more like local opportunities around here for me versus when I lived in Brooklyn. When I lived in New York, I really had to travel to like relevant conventions. And for example, last year, 2022, I did 3 events that I was able to just drive to. Like I just loaded up my truck and went to them, which is sort of like a good balance for me, I think. Number 4 is kind of going along with that last sentiment of like my heart not being in it, is that overall, it's just not worth it to me. It's not worth the effort. Just for like a little bit of context, before the pandemic, I was going like 24/7, 16-hour days, no weekends, no days off, no downtime, like no decompression. Awful when I think about it. The pandemic sort of forced me to stop that momentum, and I just have not felt inspired to go back to it. I enjoy downtime very much now. And again, kind of what I was saying earlier, having done a few shows since the pandemic started again, I feel that my time really is better spent elsewhere, like focusing on marketing, having that downtime and decompressing so I can work harder during the week. I still really enjoy traveling and seeing new cities and seeing my friends, but I want it going forward to be like a net positive experience, kind of the way OkashiCon was. I was spreading myself so thin that I never got to enjoy any of the traveling I did. By the end of it, everything was kind of a blur. A lot of the conventions that I did in those years where I was going crazy all blended together in my brain, which is a bummer. It's kind of distressing actually. And I think it's okay to do that. Like I don't necessarily think, I'm not telling you don't do that if that's what you want to do. I just don't know if I really was giving myself enough time to think about if it was what I wanted to do. And I have since discovered that I really enjoy spending like whole weekends playing video games or like baking things. Where I'm at, it's not really for me anymore. You do it if you want. I don't want. And the 5th and final like reason factor thing definitely stems from that feeling, is that my anxiety is really different now. I'm working on it, but ultimately I have a dog and a husband now, which I did not before the pandemic. Sort of. And you know what? Maybe the pandemic made my separation anxiety a lot worse. I've always struggled with it, but it's really hard now. Maybe it made me more conscious of how precious my time is. I was 28 before the pandemic, and I am turning 32 this year. That is crazy to just lose the end of your 20s, right? Like that. I'm not sad about it, but I definitely am feeling the weight of existence. Right? Like I was saying in the last point, I want to be more intentional with my energy and my life, therefore. And you know what? Maybe I am just still a little bit anxious about being in crowds. Whatever it is, doing conventions gives me a lot more anxiety than it used to, both leading up to the convention and during the convention and going home from the convention and doing my debriefs after the convention. I just have so much more dread and I am not having a good time like I used to. And like ultimately you can't do everything when you're like a one-person small business. I like to say micro business. And so if something is legitimately consistently filling you with dread, don't do it. Like, let it drop off and focus your energy elsewhere. It's okay to not continue doing things, right? You know, I gave it a few shots. When I first started doing the conventions again in 2021, I had the dread, I had the anxiety, and I thought, okay, well maybe this is just like me jumping back into it after a pandemic, which it's reasonable to have those feelings, but they kind of didn't go away. It's just different now, and I don't want to do it. That being said, I will obviously still do some conventions. I really just wanted a clickbaity title. But what I mainly mean is that it's not a big part of my business anymore. I don't actually never want to do Artist Alley again. I just don't want this particular grind to be a part of my life the way it used to be. You know, I'll still go to ones in Texas. Like I said, I hope to go to AkashiCon again. I go to San Japan as an attendee almost every year, you know, to see my friends, to see my family. And I still plan on going to events that I can drive to on the West Coast. I really enjoyed that last year. Even if I have to drive like 2 hours because of traffic, which I'm kind of getting used to, it still is like kind of worth it to be at home in my own bed with my dog at the end of the day. Or, you know, maybe I'll try to pick cities that I have been wanting to visit and make like an actual mini vacation out of it and like just see it as an excuse for a mini vacation versus like work that I have to grind and like have high goals for myself, that kind of stuff. Ultimately, I have found that as a one-person micro business, things really start to flounder when your heart is not fully in it, when you don't feel passionate enough to like keep it going at that level that it needs to be. I don't feel the love for doing Artist Alley the way that I used to, and so I want to just scale back on it rather than half-ass a bunch of events and it be like an overall failure, like a net failure, which I think is maybe a good takeaway for you guys, that if your heart is half in it, you might end up with half the outcome you expected. Also, that it's okay to just quit things. It's okay to quit things that are not working out for you. I'm like a big proponent of that. Sunk cost fallacy, that dread and regret is like really hard to overcome, but I think we should embrace quitting in 2023 because life is so short and so precious. Keep growing, keep going forward, keep setting goals, but assess whether what you're doing is serving that goal. That being said, I do hope to see you guys at any events that I do in the future, and I'm hoping to refocus some of the energy I used before on Artist Alleys back into Ugly Plants in different ways. I like that Ugly Plants sort of fosters a community, and I want to really focus on that going forward. Whether it's here on YouTube or whatever social media platform emerges in this like weird social media apocalypse that we're in right now. Yeah, so cheers. Thanks for stopping by, and I hope I have something fun for you guys very soon, right? Okay. So satisfying, right? Bye-bye.